Hi there, I'm just reading the Gabor Mate book, which is brilliant, and it's called The Myth of Being Normal. Now, this book addresses some really interesting points that are important to the coaching that I do, because obviously, as you know, I help people to change their health and get well. But it also came up in a podcast interview I did yesterday because they asked me, why is it that I predominantly deal with women? And I thought, I don't actually know. But it was interesting because I had to think on it. And it's been the same with my readings. It's always been predominantly women. There is more men that come now, but it is still predominantly women. And I think women are more open to alternative therapies. They're more open to going to the doctor and discussing when something's not right, whereas men less so. My other half would go to the funeral director before he'd go to the doctors. So, there's a few factors. But also, when I was reading the Gabor Mate book, he talked about the fact that women do actually statistically get more ill than men, especially chronic diseases, okay, particularly chronic diseases. Now, my videos are normally very off the cuff and they kind of just go wherever I want to go. But this one, you're going to notice I might be a little bit less fluid and my eyes are all over because I have got some statistics. Not too many, but I do need to make sure that I give you the right statistics, okay? So here's why women get chronically ill more than men. Now, first off, we live in a patriarchal society, which means it is run by the men, for the men, it is biased to the men, and women just have to, fill whatever space is left over. Now, it is changing. There have been a lot of women who are very groundbreaking. Excuse me. They are breaking stereotypes and molds, but for most of us, that isn't necessarily the case. But also, you have to remember that the generations before us are very much a product of their time. And we have been exposed to that, so we've seen it, whether that's on TV, whether that's in family dynamics, workplace dynamics, and of course, just walking down the street. Now, a lot of you guys will say to me, I don't watch the news, don't watch any TV if I can help it. But you've only got to be in a pub that's got a TV on, and whether your eye just catches it or not, your subconscious still takes on what it's seeing. If you're walking down the high street and you're seeing all the billboards, your brain is still taking in that information. If you're watching Disney with the kids or the grandchildren, your brain is still absorbing that, okay? And so it shapes us whether we realize it or not. So what we find here is that women are much more likely to have chronic illnesses such as fibromyalgia. We also are at higher risk of irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, migraines, autoimmune issues such as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, which is the stomach and digestive area. We are 3 times more likely to get rheumatoid arthritis than the men, okay? We are 9 times more likely to get lupus. And interestingly, I don't know any men who've got lupus. I only know women, but I have come across a couple of men who've got fibromyalgia. I haven't gone looking for them, to be fair, so, it might just be one of those things. Women are also at a much higher risk of multiple sclerosis even. And we're twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. If a woman smokes, she is double the risk of lung cancer and malignancies, okay? So if you don't smoke, you're still at a higher risk than the men. But as soon as you bring smoking into the equation, it doubles the risk, okay? We're also more likely to have Alzheimer's, and that is much higher again if you're black and female. So can you see how things are just so different? So why are women so chronically ill when compared to men? All right. So here's the reasons. So women are much more likely to repress their anger. They don't have the total ability to say no. They go to say no and yes comes out, or they have other issues that mean that they just say yes even though they resent it. And if we look at the way that women are treated by society, you will find that it's not just our immediate loved ones that do this, okay? So things like sexual harassment, workplace bullying, racism, sexism, sexualization by media, books, films, TV, everything, advertising, that all plays a part. And as I said, whether you actually are aware of it or not, it is still going on around us. And when we're going through those things, like if you're being the subject of bullying or racism, it's very hard to say, go, oi, stop doing that, all right? Or no, I'm not going to put up with that behavior from you, all right? We have been indoctrined to put up with it, especially people who are the victims of racism. They have seen it with their parents and their grandparents, so they kind of just hunch and get on with it. But that has an emotional and a mental impact. So society has always sexualized women or locked us up in castles and stolen all our wealth. And it's no better in 2022 than it ever has been. We may not have bikini clad models on all the game shows like we did back in the 60s, 70s and 80s when I was growing up. But it is still here in other ways. I mean, you've only got to look at Disney. Disney has all these helpless females that need rescuing by a man. So Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel, you know, think of any of them, okay? At least Finding Nemo, Nemo was rescued by men, you know, so at least it's a bit more fair. It wasn't some hapless, stupid female who'd gotten herself into a problem and needed to be rescued by a man, okay? They're often dressed in a very sexualized way. So Jasmine from the Arabian Nights, can't think what that one's called, The Little Mermaid, you know, if you go through, even if you just Google your favorite characters, or if you're still watching those movies with your kids, have a look at what's going on. So why is it then that when you watch things like Lara Croft, whether that's the TV program, or sorry, the film I should say, or whether that's the game, why does she have to be so provocative? Indiana Jones never was. He just wears a scruffy old jacket and a hat and a shirt and a pair of jeans. You know, no big deal. So women have been used to sell cars, to walk the grid at things like the Formula One. I remember seeing them when I used to go stock car racing as a kid. We have been used to be at boxing matches or to be on game shows and other sporting events where, you know, you walk around with the card in your bikini, you know. These days, if you watch TV, you've got Britain's Got Talent, X Factor, Strictly, all of those. The women are always dressed up to the nines, but they're normally always showing stuff off. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with that. You know, if you want to do that, then that's fine. But my point is that they're all done up like the nines and the men are just wearing a tuxedo. You know, why do the women have to be dressed up that way? You know, why can't they just wear a suit? And I found that when I watched the women's football a little while ago, or even the men's football where the women are now being brought in to present, the women are always dressed in like spike heels, full makeup like they're going clubbing. But the men, they just put on a smart suit and or even just a shirt and smart trousers. They don't dress up anywhere near as much as the women do. And again, if that's their choice, brilliant. But why is that their choice? Why can't they just come in a smart top and a nice pair of trousers or a skirt, you know? Why do they have to be so highly dressed, okay? So what we find is that even the reality shows where women are portrayed as man-eaters like Love Island and The Villa, you know, the men are allowed to do what they want and that makes them a stud, but the woman, you know, she's easy. So, you know, we're sexualized there. Social media, you find that there's platforms where women will debase themselves to their membership, which is like the site OnlyFans, or they're on TikTok and doing stuff on there. And, you know, with advertising, you know, the other day I was watching an advert and Charlize Theron's in the water and she's pretty much naked and she gets up to here and then it cuts away and then you see her, you know, having her clothes put on her. Why do we need a half naked woman to sell perfume? Surely it's about the smell, you know? But this is all dominated by the men. There are women in advertising, there are women in social media companies, but it's all predominantly male, patriarchal. So then we look at kids' books. I was talking on a podcast interview yesterday and the lady was telling me about her daughter reading Horrid Henry, which is a kids' cartoon series. I think it was in book format though. And there was something about a cucumber and somebody was laughing about the cucumber. Now the child might not understand the adult take on that, but they were laughing about it and they were copying the behavior of the people around them. So that wasn't just an innocent cucumber, okay? Now, we also have to look at things like, you know, how many times when you were a kid did you borrow your mum's clothes and makeup and dress up, okay? How many times did you copy your dad? He'd got his tool belt and he was doing some DIY or washing the car or mowing the lawn and you'd emulate them. I remember doing some of that, not all of that, but some of it. We have the Me Too culture, which is basically women who've not felt they could say no, because if they wanted to survive in their career or their industry, they felt like they had no choice. And also we've got the high profile rape cases where they're basically saying that no wasn't no, they didn't really mean no. Or they'll say, oh, well, you know, look at what they were wearing. That doesn't legitimize their behavior. That doesn't mean just because they thought they were provocative that they should be able to do that, okay? So what we find is that when we were growing up, we had all these different things and we learnt a lot. Okay, and I know that when I was a kid, there was things in our household that, you know, wouldn't happen now. And I think I'm actually missing some of my notes. So apologies for that. See, I told you this wasn't natural. So when we are designated caregivers, because that always seems to fall to the women, doesn't it? It doesn't matter whether it's your parents or your in-laws. It's just one of those things. And if you are one of half a dozen siblings, but there's all boys, guess who gets to do it? Okay, it's always the girls, or nearly always the girls. So women are cast in the role of caregivers. We're the emotional glue that holds everything and everyone together. And interestingly, women have far more health issues that affect connective tissue. So things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and scleroderma and fibromyalgia, way more than men do. So is that not interesting that life parallels health or health parallels life? So mothers tend to be the shock absorbers. If you're a mum, you'll know this. Even if you're not a mum, you know, you can probably say women are the shock absorbers. So if a mother cares for a child with emotional challenges, sick partners, or children with disabilities, for instance, they then have a significantly diminished immune function. They have poorer wound healing. My partner, he heals so quickly, honestly. He might be a superhero. I can almost see the flesh healing over. I'm not too bad, but I do know people that take for ages. And as they get older, that slows down even more. Women who are those caregivers tend to have poor metabolic function, which means you're going to put on weight. Also means your hair and your skin and your nails are going to struggle. Also, they tend to have less healthy body fat distribution, and joy of joys, they age prematurely. Great. Sounds really fun, doesn't it? So childcare is a major source of stress. Largely those caregivers, those mothers, they internalize their frustrations and their stress. They don't feel they can ask their partner for help, and in some of those instances they probably know damn well they wouldn't get it even if they did ask. But if you don't ask, you definitely won't get. mothers blame themselves for that conflict. They're much more likely to be driven to use antidepressants rather than change that situation as well, which is really scary. Also, spouses and partners can be very resentful of the fact that the woman is giving her energy to the children or her sick parents because they want it. So now you've also got a partner who's actually just basically another toddler, and they're caring for their partner who's a toddler. Well, that's not a very good way forward for relationship, is it? The caregiver mother also takes on the angst and the anxiety of their partner because they want to fix it, they care. But we can't take on any more than we can handle, but we have a damn good try. So women are also sent covert messages to keep the peace. In childhood, this would be your mother maybe doing the dishes and the dinner and the housework and the laundry whilst your dad watched TV or read the newspaper or even just went out to the pub or the gym. Certainly in my house when I was under the age of 6, that was very much the scenario. My dad did work hard though, don't get me wrong. And that dynamic changed a little bit as I got older because my parents divorced and there was just myself and my dad until he remarried. So we had a housekeeper to come and do the womanly bits and the cooking, and my dad earned the money and, you know, ran the house the rest of the time. And then when he remarried, that shifted back to pretty much how it used to be. I'm not sure that apart from cleaning the car, I can ever remember my father whipping out the Hoover, okay? When I was in my teens and I was living with my mum and my stepfather was hands-on with the cooking. I don't know that I can recall him doing the cleaning, and he'd do the washing of the dishes and stuff. So he was pretty good like that, but it was still fairly old school. And so, you know, that is the dynamic that most of us probably know. So what I find here is that also when I look at the dynamic in the house, I'm pretty sure my mum learned just to bite her tongue and keep her trap shut and get on with it. Because there's a lot of times I just think my dad was never going to want to hear it. He was right and everyone else was wrong. But that again is fairly typical. Especially as when you go back, and of course if your grandparents were brought up that way, they're telling their children and probably the grandchildren, because they're teaching them to be the way that they were. And the TV programs, when you watch the reruns of anything that's past a certain age, so like Tony Hancock in Hancock's Half Hour, or on the buses, you know, those old programs from the 60s and 70s, that dynamic would have been very much, you know, woman stay at home barefoot and pregnant and run the house, man go out and earn money. And although that has changed a lot, it's still not equal. And in fact, it's more unequal because women now work and then go and do all the housework, the laundry, the cooking, the shopping, and the childcare, and the parent care, and the grandchildren care, and so on, okay? So when you then add other things to that, such as where you live in the world, poverty, racism, that really raises those statistics even more, okay? Now, I don't actually know 100% what the solution is, but as a coach, I see so many clients whose health has been wrecked by this dynamic and by the patriarchal society that we live in even. And all I can do is help people to change how they behave in their role so they're not suppressing, repressing, or internalizing their feelings, and that they can say no with confidence. And you know, a lot of my clients will tell me that they didn't feel like they were being heard as a child, or they didn't feel seen as a child, and that's played out into their adult life. Because once you believe that, once that's how you feel, your behavior generates more of the same, okay? It's not intentional, it's all subconscious. So what we find is that women need to be able to say no with confidence and without feeling that they have to retract it, or that they are being judged as being unfair or being a nuisance or difficult, because they love to slap a label on that doesn't fit with their narrative. Oh yeah, Tracy's awkward because she won't just do as I say. Oh yeah, Tracy's always so opinionated, but that means I'm not in line with their opinion, okay? So I could say the same. I could say, well, actually, you're the opinionated one because you don't agree with my opinion. You know, it's okay to have an opinion that differs from someone else, but you have to have empathy for that other person's point of view, and be open to it, even if it's not something that you want, okay? Bit like Brexit, bit like politics, bit like, what else has been divisive? COVID, you know, whatever. So there's lots of things there, okay? So what we find is that these things shape your health, and they're all going into your head. They're all being soaked in, like the pollution in the air is soaked in through your skin. You can't see it. You don't know what it's doing, but it's happening nonetheless, okay? And so it's exactly the same with society and the way it bombards us with things that engender that patriarchal society, okay? So how much of this resonated for you? How much of this behavior do you display? And the key is to think about, who do you want to be? What does that look like? What do you want your life to be like? Okay, in an ideal world, if there was no barriers, no money problems, age wasn't a problem, sex wasn't a problem, if this was a book and you were writing the story of your life, what would it look like? Okay, because once you know what you want and what that looks like, you can create the behavior that makes it happen, okay? Otherwise, you're going to keep creating the behavior that gives you what you've already got, okay? So if there isn't much here that resonates for you, if you are one of those lucky people who has great health and isn't afraid to say no and does just kind of, you know, stand by your boundaries, then that's great, okay? If you are stuck in a trap and then you need help, then I have a free health group which you can join, which is called Heal Your Body, Heal Your Mind, Heal Your Body. You're welcome to work with the resources I put in there. If you'd rather have a one-to-one session and work with me, then you can get in contact via my website and we can have a free chat and see what we can do to help you. But it's basically our responsibility to change society. Men are not going to be our saviors, and really it's a man's world, so we need to make it a woman's world so that this is much more in line with who we are and what we want, okay? So if any of that resonates for you, if that is your health in a nutshell, then get in contact with me and we'll see what we can do.